War has never been just about steel and blood. It is a symphony of power, deception, and brutality where the victors carved their names into history with the weapons of their time. Across the ancient world, civilizations didn't merely fight, they engineered terror. Tactics, turning the battlefield into a ruthless arena of strategy and slaughter. These tactics weren't mere skirmishes, they were exhibitions of calculated savagery designed to annihilate the deathly silence of the ancient Roman legions. War is chaos, screams, clashing steel, and the deafening roar of battle, but the Roman legions knew a deadlier sound: absolute silence. Imagine standing on the battlefield expecting a thunderous war cry from your enemy, only to be met with an eerie, disciplined advance, thousands of men marching in perfect sync, shields locked, faces emotionless, an impenetrable machine of war. This was the Romans' psychological weapon: silence. It wasn't hesitation, it was calculated terror. Enemy warriors, accustomed to frenzied shouts and reckless charges, would hesitate, their instincts betrayed by the unnatural calm of the advancing legion. By the time they gathered their courage, it was already too late. This discipline translated into their legendary testudo, or tortoise formation, a wall of shields, impenetrable to arrow slings and even siege weapons. Used in sieges and open battles alike, it allowed the Romans to advance under constant attack, unyielding, relentless. But silence was not just a formation, it was a deception. Julius Caesar, during the Battle of Alesia, feigned weakness, allowing the Gauls to believe his forces were breaking. Then, with chilling precision, his men closed in from all sides, trapping Vercingetorix in an inescapable noose. The silence of the Roman legions was not just a strategy, it was a promise of death. The unstoppable war elephants of the Maurya Empire. The ground trembles before the battle even begins. Dust rises in thick clouds, the scent of earth and sweat mingling with the stench of fear. Then out of the haze they appear, colossal beasts clad in armor, their tusks sharpened to deadly points, their riders guiding them like living war machines. This was the sheer terror of the war elephants of the Maurya Empire, a force so overwhelming that no ordinary soldier could stand against it. Chandragupta Maurya, the empire's founder, wielded these behemoths not just as weapons but as instruments of psychological destruction. Sight alone could shatter enemy morale, turning hardened warriors into fleeing men before the first strike. But these creatures were not simply thrown into battle, they were trained with precision, their discipline rivaling that of human armies. The Arthashastra, written by Kautilya, Chandragupta's chief advisor, meticulously documented their care from diet to battlefield tactics. War elephants were conditioned to charge straight into enemy lines, trampling soldiers, scattering cavalry, and breaking formations with sheer force. At the Battle of Hydaspes, King Porus of India used them masterfully against Alexander the Great, creating a living fortress that resisted the Macedonian phalanx. Though Alexander prevailed, his men never forgot the horror of facing an enemy that neither shield nor sword could stop. In the end, the true power of the Mauryan war elephant was not just its size or strength, but its ability to turn the tide of history with a single earth-shaking charge, the bloodthirsty charge of the Viking berserkers. There was no formation, no strategy, only pure, unrelenting fury. The Viking berserkers did not march like disciplined legions or trample enemies under towering beasts. They stormed the battlefield like a force of nature, howling, foaming at the mouth, their eyes vacant with an inhuman rage. Clad in animal pelts, bearskins for the berserker, wolf hides for the Ulfedner, they seemed more beast than man. They did not fear death, they invited it, charging headlong into enemy lines with reckless abandon, wielding axes and swords with terrifying strength. For those standing against them, there was no time for courage, only survival. But this battle madness was not without preparation. Before combat, berserkers engaged in ritualistic rites believed to involve chants, drumbeats, and possibly hallucinogenic substances that unleashed their bloodlust. Some sources suggest they consumed flyagaric mushrooms or alcohol mixed with henbane, fueling their trance-like state where pain became meaningless and exhaustion ceased to exist. This was not just combat, it was a transformation. The Ulfednir. The Wolf warriors fought with no armor, moving faster than any shielded foe, breaking formations through sheer ferocity. To fight a berserker was to face an opponent who could not be reasoned with, who could not be intimidated. Their charge was not merely an attack, it was an onslaught, a storm of blood and steel that left nothing but terror in its wake. The ruthless siege tactics of the Assyrian Empire. There was no mercy. When the Assyrians laid siege, their war machine did not simply conquer. It annihilated. Unlike reckless charges or brute force, their methodical cruelty unfolded like a slow, inescapable nightmare. Cities fortified by towering walls, once thought impregnable, became death traps. As the Assyrians approached with ruthless efficiency, they engineered colossal siege. Towers battering rams reinforced with iron and massive scaling ladders, ensuring no fortress could stand against them. But their true weapon was terror. Surrender was often the only way to avoid the inevitable slaughter that awaited those who resisted. The Assyrians were pioneers of psychological warfare, using sheer brutality to break enemy morale before a single stone was thrown. Prisoners were impaled outside city walls, their screams a warning to those still inside. Others were flayed alive, their skins stretched across gates as a grotesque promise of what was to come. These were not acts of mindless savagery. They were calculated, designed to spread fear so that future cities would submit without a fight. But when resistance was met, the Assyrians deployed devastating strategies, tunneling beneath walls to collapse defenses, flooding enemy strongholds with fire and poisoned water supplies, and using massive shields to cover sappers as they worked. No empire before them had weaponized fear and innovation so effectively. Their sieges were not simply battles. They were statements. When the Assyrians came, survival was a privilege, not a right. The invincible shield wall of the Anglo-Saxons, it was not brute force or reckless aggression that defined the Anglo-Saxon way of war. It was discipline, unity, and an unbreakable wall of steel. When their warriors took the field, they did not rush forward in chaotic charges or scatter like undisciplined rabble. Instead, they formed an impenetrable barrier, shoulder-to-shoulder shields locked so tightly that they became a single living fortress. The Sildbur or shield wall was not just a formation, it was survival itself. Against it, cavalry charges faltered, arrows splintered, and enemy infantry crashed like waves against an immovable cliff. But strength alone did not hold the line. It was coordination drilled into warriors from youth. Each man understood his place, relying on the shields beside him as much as his own weapon. The front ranks bore the brunt of the assault, their shields absorbing impact after impact, while those behind them thrust spears through the gaps, striking down enemies who dared to approach. The battle was not won by individual heroics, but by endurance, as fatigue and fear broke enemy formations long before the wall did. And when the moment was right, the Anglo-Saxons would surge forward, using the sheer weight of their locked shields to push back their foes, turning defense into unstoppable momentum. To break the shield wall was to break the army itself, but as history proved, that was easier said than done. The deadly horse archers of the Mongol horde, speed was their weapon. Precision was their death stroke. The Mongol horse archers did not rely on towering walls or heavy armor. They fought like Mongols did not fight fair, nor did they fight by the rules of others. They fought on their terms, and by the time their enemies realized it, the battle was already lost. Their precision in archery was matched by their ruthless efficiency. Their cavalry was unmatched, and their ability to strike swiftly and retreat made them nearly unstoppable. What made them terrifying wasn't just their speed, but their ability to read and manipulate the battlefield before the first arrow was even released. Mongol horse archers didn't simply win battles, they made their enemies second-guess every decision they made. They left no room for hesitation, and their unpredictable strategies sowed fear before any action had taken place. The psychological warfare they employed was as deadly as their arrows. War elephants and cavalry of the Maurya Empire. The Maurya Empire had its own terrifying weapon of war elephants. These massive beasts were equipped with armor and used to trample infantry and cavalry alike in the hands of Chandragupta Maurya and later his grandson Ashoka. The war elephant became a symbol of imperial power and an unbeatable weapon of war. The sight of these towering animals charging down the battlefield was enough to break enemy formations and shatter the morale of even the bravest soldiers trained to charge into the enemy ranks, crushing everything in their path. These elephants were no mere beasts of burden, they were living tanks. Each elephant was controlled by its rider who guided it through the chaos of battle like a well-oiled machine, while the elephants, sheer size and strength were their main advantage. They were perfected the art of terror, using swift raids to send fear far ahead of their army. The Mongols spread rumors of their savagery, which in turn made their enemies surrender without a fight. The Mongol horse archers would strike at night, retreating before dawn, leaving their enemies with little to no time to react. Their speed and unpredictability ensured that their enemies never knew when or where they would strike. Again, in many cases, whole cities surrendered at the mere threat of Mongol forces approaching. Genghis Khan's army would often leave behind a trail of destruction just to send a message. The fear they instilled was often more effective than the actual physical conquest itself. The Mongols understood that war was not only about strength, but about terror and perception. They made sure that their reputation preceded them and that fear was always their first weapon. The fearsome battle tactics of the Spartans. When we think of ancient warriors, the Spartans are some of the most iconic symbols of battle-tested warriors. Fearless, disciplined, and relentless, the Spartans were a force to be reckoned with, but they were not just warriors of strength. They were masters of psychological warfare. Their shield wall was one of the most effective formations ever used in battle. Designed to protect the soldiers and keep them organized, it turned their warriors into an unbreakable line of defense. When the Spartans formed their shield wall, they became an immovable force even against overwhelming odds. The Spartans could hold their ground simply by standing together. Their psychological strength came not only from their tactics, but from their unwavering belief in their code. The fear they instilled in their enemies was a result of their relentless discipline and unflinching courage. The Spartans never surrendered. They never retreated. They fought until the last man. Their courage and determination making them a terrifying opponent on any battlefield. It wasn't just their physical prowess that made the Spartans legendary. It was their ability to control fear and use it to their advantage on the battlefield. The Spartan warrior was not just a soldier, he was a symbol of the unyielding strength of discipline, honor, and fearlessness.